Today we are going to talk about the mystery of the third temple. Parsha Terumah begins with the commandment for the people to donate materials in order to build the Mishkan, the sanctuary. And the Mishkan, with the ark containing the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, the menorah, which gave out spiritual and physical light, the showbread table, which holds bread, baked bread with its material blessings, and the altars with their different abilities to connect us to the one God, became essential aspects of the Mishkan. Now, later, these furnishings for the Mishkan became essential parts of the first temple, and later the second temple, which were built in Jerusalem, but later destroyed. And now we are waiting for the third temple. So today, really it was Mishkan preparing us for the first temple, the second temple, and God willing, the third temple. Why do we need the third temple? What does the third temple add to God's plan and to our purpose in the world? People can't just build it. Even though we want the actuality of the Messianic era, the underlying causes of the temple's destructions need to be resolved, and this will be God's decision. When God decides that this has been resolved and it's time to bring the Jewish people back to their land and get his world back in order, changes will occur that will allow us to peacefully start construction. When the third temple will be built and in use, the Jews now in exile will all return. And that will be the catalyst for world peace. The Talmud in Brachot 49a says, God will build Jerusalem and gather all those of Israel who have been pushed away. Rav Nachman interprets this: when will Jerusalem be rebuilt? When it's time for the exiles to be gathered. Maimonides, the Rambam, says in the Laws of the King. Now, Mashiach will be here when the Beis HaMikdash is ready to be built. So let's talk about that for a moment. That the Rambam says, this is a quote, if a king will arise from the house of David, who diligently studies the Torah and observes its mitzvahs as prescribed by the written law and the oral law, as did David, his ancestor, if he will compel all Israel to walk in the way of the Torah and rectify the breaches in its observance and fight the wars of God, then we may consider him Mashiach. So he will wake people up to living a life of Torah and mitzvahs and what that is. If he succeeds in the above, builds the temple in its place, this is continuing from the Rambam. If he succeeds in the above, builds the temple in its place, and gathers the dispersed of Israel, he is definitely the Mashiach. He will then improve the entire world, motivating all the nations to serve God together. So that's the aim, that the whole world should wake up to serving God, that's what we're here for, and that everybody should know it. So how can we relate to the building of this ancient temple and to the changes that will come with it? The Lubavitcher Rebbe explained, for people to wake up and say, I want to serve God, all there is God, I want to serve God, that's what I want, is really an amazing awakening. The Lubavitcher Rebbe explained that the Messianic era is a quantum leap in the way that human beings perceive their world, going to look at the world differently. Once that change has occurred, things that seem absurd to us today will appear perfectly reasonable. So just as we can't imagine world peace until it comes, the same is true with building the third temple. Now, the Rebbe, what we're going to speak about today is that the Rebbe spoke about this, what this means in a mimer. A mimer is a teaching, a deep teaching from the Rebbe in 1962. For those who want to know the name of it, it's called Ma'amar Gadol Yehiyah, 5722. And Tzvi Freeman analyzed it, wrote about it, and now let's try to get a glimpse of what's behind this idea. How is building the temple in Jerusalem a prerequisite to collecting all Jews, and how does the ingathering of the exiles promote world peace? What's the connection? So there's the ingathering of the Jews, and there is world peace. Chabad thought explains that the location of the temple is a gateway or an interface between heaven and earth. Location of the temple is a gateway, an interface between heaven and earth. The temple itself, with all its chambers and accoutrement, is an amplifier and a broadcaster of that system to the rest of the world. So that interface place between heaven and earth, the temple itself broadcasts that system of the interface to the rest of the world. So we need to understand, what does that mean? This is expressed in the words of Jacob, Yaakov, that he spoke this when he woke up from his dream of angels ascending and descending a ladder to the heavens. And what did he say when he woke up? Yes, God is in this place, and I did not know. How awesome if this is this place. This could only be the house of God, and this is the gateway of heaven. So Yaakov had this experience. Yes, God is in this place. I did not know. How awesome is this place? This could only be the house of God, and this is the gateway of heaven. Then Jacob took the stone he had slept on and set it as a monument, declaring that it would be the house of God. So it was more than 700 years before Jacob's vision was fulfilled. King Solomon built the first temple on that mountain and placed the holy ark over that very stone. So God brought Jacob to that place, miraculously, that place. And in that place would be the place of the temple. So that ark was put on the stone. A spiritual light emanated from the temple to the entire planet, drawing seekers toward Jerusalem like a magnet. That's why everybody wants Jerusalem. And everyone was drawn to Jerusalem because of that spiritual light that emanated from within the temple. Peace reigned for a short time throughout the world. When King Solomon was the king, peace reigned throughout the world. Now, the rabbis of the Talmud call that stone the foundation stone because they say it is the place upon which the universe was founded, the creation from which all creation began. Now, in what way would the initial point of creation differ from all the rest of the earth? What makes it the gateway of heaven? So this original place where God created that first, that is the gateway between heaven and earth. And this is an interface between heaven and earth. It's a border between complete order and complete randomness. The world seems completely random. What's going on? Leaf falls from a tree. Why? I don't know. It fell from the tree. So it seems like it's completely random. But and above is God's order, how he chose to make the world. So in halacha, Torah law, there's a lot of discussion on the status of twilight. There's a gray area between when day stops and night begins. If a child is born in that time, is it still the day? Is it already the night? It becomes a question of what's the date of his birth and when will he have a Brit Milah. So this is something that is a lot of discussion about the between these, what seems like opposites. A gateway is one of the most common metaphors of Torah, a place where you are neither in or out, but part of both, like turning a corner. Now, in this parsha, it is mentioned Bariach HaTichon, that when they made the Mishkan, they put up the four walls, and they had bars that would stand up to hold it up. And in the very middle, they had a bar that miraculously went across one side, turned the corner, went around the other side, turned the corner, went around the other side, turned the corner. The bar turned the corner, not with nails, not like two bars that you put together with nails. The bar itself just went around and turned the corner. And anybody can see that when you turn a corner, like you're walking here and you're facing this direction, then you get to that corner and suddenly you're going to be facing this direction. But in that moment of turn, what direction are you facing? You're partially here, you're partially, it's like a no direction in that moment before you turn. So this has to do with this gateway. Now in Torah, so we want to talk about what does the gateway mean? And what does it have to do with the temples? And what is the difference between all of this and this third temple? The Mishkan obviously we traveled through the desert, and the advantage of the Mishkan is that we were able to take it with us and travel. But then when we got to Israel, the Holy Land, and people were able to build a house for God, David said, well, why is God like in a tent? Let's make a house. And his son built the Beis HaMikdash, which lasted some years, then it was destroyed. Then some years later came another Beis HaMikdash, and that was destroyed, and there's going to be a third Beis HaMikdash. But what does all this mean? So in Torah, God himself has principally two distinct names. What we call Havaya, that's what we say we use that as a substitute for the four-letter name of God that is not pronounced outside the temple. So it's Yud, He, Vav, He. The only time that name was really pronounced was when it came out of the mouth of the Kohen Gadol, of the chief Kohen, in the Beit HaMikdash, only at certain times. So that means that name, Yud, He, Vav, He, is so holy it cannot be said. And when we say it in prayer, we say Baruch Atah, and we say another name instead of this name because it's so holy we can't say it. And it said that when that name was said in the temple, everyone just bowed down. It wasn't a thing they thought about. It was just that name. Just they felt that they were in the presence of God. And there's another name. We have the name Havaya, which is Yud He Vav He, and Elohim. Elohim is a different name. Now, Elohim is the name of God as he is the agent behind all natural forces. So when the Torah discusses the creation of the world by 10 sayings, it uses the name as in Elohim said. Elohim said, it should be light, and there was light. So Elohim is the name for the one who creates nature and is involved in nature and is doing what needs to happen in nature. So Elohim is the name for God expressed within time and space and within all that we could observe. It's God as he is immanent. So when we are aware of God being here, we are really usually talking about Elohim. Now, Havaya is God as he is beyond all that can be known. It's a name that carries the meaning of was, is, and will be in a single word because it has the vowels for was, is, and will be, all in that name. And that has to do with a perspective from which past, present, and future are all one. For God, past, present, and future are all one. When all time is folded into a single point, and not like a line, past, present, future, but it's all in one, what happens is that it exists for God, Havaya, as a single point of 0 dimensions. So time is like in this 0 point. So where is the threshold where the two meet? Havaya, which is really beyond nature because we have time for nature. What does it mean? A tree grows, a person grows, a birthday. What does all that mean? It means that we experience that in nature. So where is it that Havaya and Elohim meet? And the answer to that is everywhere. They meet everywhere. Being two names of the same God, every point of the universe, all of life, all activity, even existence itself is a dynamic of these two opposites at once. When we say a blessing, Baruch Atah, then we say Ado, but that really means Havaya. Elokeinu, which means Elohim, means Elohim. So when we say the blessing, we're saying with both. We're blessing Havaya and Elohim, which is always and everywhere. So this fascinating truth is beyond our understanding. Like we can't understand how that could be. That infinity is completely expressed in the finite, and the finite is completely sourced and at one with the infinite. So let's consider life. Every living thing is neatly defined and limited by some membrane that distinguishes it from its environment. So what's going on in the membrane? That's like like in the skin or on the table. It's like where the itness of it stops. So that's how you can see that a person is a person. They have skin. It's a boundary. So what is it doing in the boundary? It's changing time, space, life. And what is it doing from inside that boundary? Transcending itself. So each of us is transcending ourselves from the inside all the time, while we are also human beings with a boundary, a membrane. So that means that each of us is much different than what we think we are. We're much different than what we think we are. Or you could look at matter and energy. Matter is limitation, energy is transcendence. So there's this transcendence going on all the time, even though there's limitation going on all the time. Or beauty. The most beautiful, fascinating things in our universe are those instances of nature where order and chaos merge together in perfect balance. So when we see a painting, we see the painting, but if you see the studio of the artist, it's like paint all over the place. He's like, and changing, and it's a process, a chaotic until it's right. And so that together creates something beautiful. The true union, that's really interesting because that means that that's what is involved in process. The process is going on until it becomes what it's meant to be. And they're both in perfect balance. Now, the true union of these opposites is in the existence of each thing in the universe. This is in everything. Nothing exists on its own, just as nothing happens without a force to cause it. Every moment is a new creation. That force is God, as he is called Havaya, from which all is regenerated, recreated at every moment out of nothing. God creates and recreates us and everything at every moment. The name Havaya carries this meaning as well. It can be also read as a causative verb, that which causes being, because the first letter is a yud, so it's a causative letter. So Havaya is that which is causing being. But if all was created by God through the modality of Havaya, we would still be folded up in that oneness of space-time or in some wave form description. So because God is the creator, you know, when we use the name Havaya, even though God is the complete creator, it isn't like the painter who paints, whose room is a mess. And he's like, with all those paints, and you look at the floor and you look at his vest and it's all full of stuff until it gets like that. Because when God creates it, it's created, but not in a way that is expressed. It's like, so it would be in this oneness. In order for the universe to have a universe with separate points in space and time, God simultaneously creates in the modality of Elohim. So he creates, Havaya creates, but Elohim brings it out. It's both names of the same one God. And God conceals his presence within the limitations of nature. So with God, the paradox of infinite creativity, creating every individual creation out of absolute void from nothing, with infinite restraint. So God creates it and holds it back. And that restraint itself has to do with our difficulty to know anything beyond the forces of nature. Because we live so much in nature, Havaya conceals himself. Elohim brings out nature. We can't imagine anything other than nature. So we may not even recognize the single force behind them that is Elohim. The influence of the transcendent force of Havaya, however, is not just beyond our scope. It's entirely outside of our reality. So we don't know, recognize, experience Havaya as God. But God wants us to experience him as God. So what's going to happen? So he made us in this way that we experience ourselves and nature. We are creatures of self-contained time and space. Our perception can't register the presence of a force that would neutralize that reality, even though it's here at every turn. So God is the creator all the time at every turn. So we go about life as though we just are and things just are and nothing stands beyond our sensible little world. That's not the truth. All the disharmony in our world, all the conflict and the pain, emerges from our inability to be at peace with a transcendence that forms the fundamental basis of our reality. So we need to say, this transcendence is constantly going on. God is here. All there is God creating us and making a difference. And we need to be at peace with this transcendence that forms the fundamental basis of our reality. So Pharaoh, as an example of an idolater, said to Moses, "Who is Havaya that I should listen to his voice?" Because Moshe came and said, "Havaya is sending me to you." He says, "Who's Havaya?" Pharaoh didn't deny the existence of such a being, but he couldn't imagine that he would care, that God would care to involve himself into Egypt's internal politics. So some people say, yeah, there's a first cause, there's a God out there for sure, but does he care really about me? How could the one out there be involved in here? So that paradox has to do with the gateway. Abraham was the first to question and ultimately reject this dichotomy, that God's up there and we are down here and there's no connection. And Abraham introduced the idea that the same one God who originated all things also has an intimate concern about what goes on down here. Until Abraham, the Midrash says that God was the Lord of the heavens, and Abraham made him God of heaven and earth. So this is all about recognizing God above, Havaya, recognizing Elohim here, God creating nature, and recognizing that God is one. Abraham said that all the idolaters' gods of wind and fire and love and war are no more than manifestations of a single transcendent being who does not change and from whom all things come. As he can be found infinite and unchanging at the essence that precedes all things, so he can be found in the ephemeral temporal world in which we live. Havaya is Elohim. In truth, there is nothing but him. That's what we need to know, that the transcendence within ourselves and the way that we live in our everyday are one. And we have to work the transcendence to be how we live in our lives with the membrane, with our uniqueness. But this schism continues to prevail. Secularism has banished the notion of transcendence altogether, pretending that we all live in a flat world of atoms and energy. Even people who consider spirituality continue to separate their spiritual quest from their material tasks and needs. A lot of people meditate to get out there, and they don't see the connection to what's going on here. So people struggle with accepting our smallness before a higher, conscious, and intentional power. There's a very important piece to know in terms of doing our work in the world, that we're small in front of God, that God is great, and we are small and humble, and we ask God for help, and God is with us all the time. But that smallness, which is very different than the ego in the secular world, that said, well, you got to be somebody big, But we need to know that we are small and God is great. And that our purpose here is a purpose that we do for God, a purpose that we do as an emissary of God. So God created a magnificent scheme of nature that appears so consistent and so faultless that its workings hide even a glimpse of his presence behind it. So people don't believe that God exists because God hid himself so that we could find him. But when people don't believe that God exists and God is hidden, but there's one place where God is revealed, and that is the chamber of the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of Solomon's temple, the place where the Ark of the Covenant was placed over that rock. What happened in that space? That space met with non-space. That's what we're talking about, this paradox. The space met with non-space. The chamber of the Holy of Holies measured 20 cubits by 20 cubits. That's the room itself, 20 by 20. The ark was placed in the center. So the ark was made, that's our ark that we could say is real in our world, and it measured 2.5 by 1.5 cubits. Now, from the southern wall of the chamber to the side, now when you put the ark exactly on that rock where it's supposed to be, in place, as they say, the measurement was taken from the southern wall of the chamber to the side of the ark, measured 10 cubits. Remember, the room is 20 cubits. So when you measure to the ark, it's 10 cubits. The same, so here's the ark. If you measure from one side to the wall, you get 10 cubits. When you measure from the other side to the wall, you get 10 cubits. Just a main. Each measurement came to 10 cubits from the ark. Yet if you measure just from wall to wall, you got a measure of 20 cubits. So just a second. If you measure the ark when it's outside, as it was made of that place in the temple, it has a measurement. But when you put the ark in the center and you measure from one side to the wall and you measure to the one side of the wall, it's the same as if there's nothing there. And the Talmud answers, so what happened to the width and breadth of the ark in between? Not there. And the Talmud answers, Rabbi Levi said, we have received a tradition from our forefathers. The space of the ark had no measure. Now remember, the ark is the holiest place in the world, the Holy of Holies. And Rashi explains there, the ark took up no space. The ark itself had to take up 2.5 by 1.5 cubits because those are the dimensions specified for it in the Torah. In order to be an ark that could go into this chamber and not take up space, it was only when you measured the chamber that the ark took up no space. In other words, the ark by itself had a space, a measurement, but when you put the ark in the right place, it took up no space. So what does this mean? Space and non-space met, but neither canceled out the other. This is what we're talking about in Havaya. The Havaya is the one who is the source of everything, where past, present, and future are one. But when it comes to Elohim, then there's nature and measurement. So no space has to do with Havaya. Space has to do with Elohim. And in this place, they are both one. That is exactly what Jacob said. Havaya is in this space. And yet, this is the house of Elohim. That is what Yaakov expressed. At the place of his dream of angels going up and down, Yaakov found himself in a place that expresses the essence of Torah. Torah hadn't been given yet, but he came to that place. He found himself at the nexus of two expressions of the one God, that gateway, Havaya and Elohim, the place where heaven ends and earth begins, and the two embrace. Yaakov, Abraham's grandson, envisioned a time when his own descendants would build a house there, a means by which this harmony could be captured and projected out into the entire world, until no one will teach his fellows saying no Havaya, because all of them will know me, from their smallest to their greater, says Havaya. So this, one thing we're finding out here is this is what happened in the first temple. And this is the truth that God wants us to know, that Havaya and Elohim, God as he is in his source beyond space, time, anything, and Elohim, who creates us in every moment, are one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. This is what we say all the time. So we're talking about today is, what does that mean? But why, and I just have to say that ark, I just have to say this right now because I can't resist. It's not part of the mimer, but it's the way it is. The Rebbe says that there was a time in the first temple when it became known prophetically that the temple was going to be destroyed. But when they were building the temple, this was under prophetic orders that God gave. There was a chamber below, a chamber where, with weaving and a chamber, and the ark was brought down into that place and placed there for the time that it would come up again. It did not come up in the second temple. It's still there. Not in the post office. It's there. And it wasn't taken away by anybody because it was so holy. The place where God wrote the tablets with his own fingers, the pieces of that, and the second, that's another to be discussed another time, God willing, that is there still. In the second temple, it didn't come up, but it was still lined up in that same place where it is right now. And so it's still working. But in the third temple, it will come up again to the right place. So God wants that we should know that Havaya and Elohim are one. But why did the first or second temple not accomplish this? The answer again lies in a clearer understanding of the space of the ark that took up no space. There's more than one way that this could play out. In fact, there are three ways. Two have already been played out, and one is still anticipated. So it's the yet anticipated one that connects with the ingathering of the exiles. So let's go back to the space of the ark. How could space remain in the midst of non-space? How could there be any measurements in that space at all? Now, when the name Havaya is dominant, both time and space should disappear altogether. But one thing you could say is, it's a miracle. God can do anything. But maybe there really is some logic to this, even a logic we may not be familiar with. So perhaps our understanding of space is not what space really is. By acknowledging that there could be non-space, as we saw in the place of the ark that takes no space, we begin to realize that space might not be an absolute given, something that just is and must be. The same God who created a world bound by time and space could have created something else altogether. We creatures of time and space find it hard to imagine what that might look like, but it's not an absurdity. In other words, God can make the world any way he wants. We could ask, is space a static thing? Or is space an event that's continually being renewed out of the void. So not only time, but space could be constantly revealed. If we choose to look at it this way, then we could see that space itself is just another expression of its creator. The same one God who is known beyond space and limitation, he is also known by the boundaries of space, but he is neither. God is not just beyond space, and he's not just within space. Both, but neither. The very fact that the two can exist, they can coexist, that space can meet non-space, and neither annuls the other, is a demonstration of this idea. He is neither of them, but rather the origin of both. The limitations of space and time has a lot of meaning. They form the backdrop for a world that appears to be just here, taking the role of an absolute existence. We expect to wake up in the same space that we went to sleep. We expect to wake up, oh, the alarm clock says to get up at this time. We expect to get up at that time. So we expect to wake up in the same time and space as usual. There is no usual. There's time and space are creations, so it seems. And it seems that we think this is what the world looks like. But there's a lot more going on here. But once the temple is rebuilt and that big shift in human perception occurs, we will understand that this entire universe is no more than an analogy. It's a parable intended to represent its creator. So everything going on here is just an analogy to represent the creator. It's an ingenious reflection of God's absoluteness. For God is the only entity that is truly just here. Everything looks like it's just here. But the truth is, God is the one who is just here. So if so, there's no conflict between transcendence and immanence, between the spiritual and the material, the soul and the body, your sense of awe and your ego. They are all two sides of the same coin, two facets of a single message. So here we have the connection between this space and Jacob, the third of the forefathers. Although the world is generally a binary place, hot or cold, here or there, there's a third factor, that which binds and unites all opposites together, even space and non-space. These two names of God, Havai and Elohim, are after all only names. The one they are naming is, in the language of the Zohar, beyond any name or any letter, or even the point on the top of the letter Yud, which is the first letter of the name Havaya. God is beyond names. In order to relate to God, we have names to relate to God, like each of us is beyond the name that we have. Does somebody truly know us? They call us by our name, but we're deeper than our name. And God is completely deeper than any name. So in the first temple, which was constructed by divine command and design, the name Havaya was dominant. A great light shone from beyond and resonated in the temple. So God himself, Yud-Keh Vav-Keh, shone a great light out, which resonated in the temple, broadcasting a signal to the entire world. It's interesting also, a light resonated. Resonated is a sound word. Light is a sight word, that they just both came together and broadcast a signal to the entire world. Now, the world itself was entirely passive. They were just responding to the signal, but that didn't last. It was so great coming from above that people were like, they didn't know what to do with it. The second temple was a grassroots achievement of a tenacious minority who had returned from exile in Babylonia. This time, the name Elohim dominated, and yet remained transparent, allowing the light of Havaya to shine through. So in the second temple, it was Elohim, but the light of Havaya was just still shining through. But in the third temple, both names, Havaya and Elohim, will be seen as two expressions of a singularity. Nature, generated by the name Elohim, will not only remain transparent, nature itself will shine, illuminating us with a great truth that can't be known through the transcendent light of Havaya. So the transcendent will shine into the immanent, but the immanent itself will shine. It won't feel like stuff. It won't feel like stuff. It will light up. The light that God's putting in, somehow, amazingly, everything will shine in this Beis Hamikdash, but it also means that it's coming out into the whole world. And nature itself will shine, illuminating us with a great truth that can't be known through the transcendent light of Havaya. So we're going to have both. The light coming through from beyond anything, and the nature shining Elohim. Jacob didn't say that Havaya shines in this place. He said, this space is awesome. The word awesome has to do with this is godly. Godly. Now, Onkelos, who was the Aramaic translator, how did he translate this space as awesome? He said this space is not a normal space. The word normal is already like, what kind of word is that? But he says this is not a normal space. This means in this space, it's obvious that space itself is not what we think it is. Space itself is not what we think. Space and time are also articulations of the divine. Space is an articulation of God. Time is an articulation of God. And for the same reason, the third temple will last forever. Not due to a light from beyond time shining down from above, but because the true meaning of time will be apparent within it. That time and all that occurs within its boundaries is essentially a commentary on that which entirely transcends time. So whatever is going on is a commentary on what's coming from beyond time. The third temple then is not about a great revelation from above. The world will sense that it is a divine creation. The third temple will be built as a result of the labor and struggle that we have done with the world for all these hard years of exile, purifying it with our mitzvahs and the journeys of our souls. So we're doing mitzvahs and we're learning and trying to work this out. It changes the whole world. The entire world will resonate with the voice of Jacob saying, space and time are awesomely divine. What happens when that signal is broadcast in all 6 directions? So when that signal coming from the temple is broadcast to the whole world, what does it mean? No, they're not a magnet. That was the first temple that was drawing everybody. With the building of the third temple, the 6 directions of the world will themselves be transformed. The whole world and all the different directions will be transformed. And that means as far as out as you can go, will be transformed. And they themselves will send back the souls of Israel. We say this in Zechariah, we say it's in Isaiah, and Isaiah says, do not fear, Jacob. From the east, I will bring your offspring, and from the west, I will gather you. I will say to the north, give back, and to the south, do not restrain. Bring my sons from far away and my daughters from the ends of the earth. And the Metzudat David, that's a commentary, says, God is commanding to all the directions of the world to bring back his children, that they themselves will bring the Jews back. They will bring the Jews back because they will be changed because of their awareness of the one God. God is bringing everyone back, but they say, yes, 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 yes. I'm part of this. I want to bring Jews back. There will be no need for conflict, for campaigns, or propaganda. It's all one thing. The construction of the temple is a healing for the world. When an organism is healed, it returns to its proper function. When the world is healed, the world itself does the same. This is God's intention in the beginning, was to make a world where we know God. And that's what it's going to be. The whole world will know God. And it says, these souls have done their job for which they were sent. We were sent into the world to learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, to know the one God. With 2,000 years of mitzvahs, they have prepared every corner of the world for this moment. Now they must return. And the world will enter the state for which it was created from the very beginning. May we see the temple rebuilt in Jerusalem sooner than we can imagine. This is God's desire, this is God's purpose, and it is in process. So may it be.